Hello, and welcome to Your Estate Matters with your hosts, my colleague Greg Bernand and myself, Nicole Garten of Heritage Trust.
Your Estate Matters is a podcast dedicated to everything estates, including building and preserving your legacy.
If it's estate related, we'll be talking about it. We're having the conversations today that will help Canadians protect their families, their assets, and their legacies tomorrow.
Rebecca, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to your work at Plan?
Sure, I'd be really happy to. My journey in community development and disability advocacy began with a simple but profound belief that everyone belongs and that community is where we find purpose, support, and joy. Growing up, I saw firsthand how communities came together to support each other. And I've always been drawn to spaces where connections were valued, where people gathered not out of obligation, but just out of genuine care for each other. And I was especially inspired by families I met early in my career. They were families who were working tirelessly to make sure that their loved ones were seen, valued, and connected. Their resilience and commitment to creating good lives for their kids, even in the face of barriers, really shaped how I understood community. And I realized that strong, intentional relationships really aren't just a nice to have, that they're the foundation of a good life. And when I came across Plan's work, it felt like coming home. Here was an organization that didn't just talk about inclusion, we're actively building it. And Plan focuses on personal support networks, creating lifelong relationships for people with disabilities, and that's exactly what I believed was needed. So for me, it's about recognizing that gifts that each person brings to the community and making sure that each of the gifts are valued, celebrated, and a part of everyday life.
So for listeners that aren't familiar, can you tell us a bit more about Plan and how it supports individuals and families with disabled members?
Of course. Plan, which stands for Plan Lifetime Advocacy Network, was founded over 30 years ago by a group of families who were asking a very powerful question. What will happen to my loved one when I'm no longer here? At its heart, Plan is about answering that question with a sense of hope and community. Plan's mission is to build personal support networks for people with disabilities. These networks are intentionally created groups of families, friends, neighbors, and community members who come together not only to provide practical support, but meaningful connection. It's about ensuring that people with disabilities are not isolated or disconnected, but instead surrounded by people who know them, love them, and are committed to their well-being.
One of the core ideas at Plan is the importance of personal support networks. Can you explain what a personal support network is and why it is so important?
Sure. A personal support network is a group of people who are intentionally brought together to support an individual with a disability. These are not paid professionals. They're friends, family members, neighbors, and community allies who are committed to being a part of that person's life for the long term. The power of these networks is they go beyond just meeting basic needs. They bring joy, security, and a deep sense of belonging. A personal network means that there's always someone there to celebrate milestones, navigate challenges, and simply share life. One story that comes to mind is a young man named Daniel. Daniel's personal support network includes his former soccer coach, his neighbor who loves gardens, a family friend who used to babysit him, and his cousin. They gather regularly, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. When Daniel wanted to apply for a part-time job, it was his network that helped him to prepare the interview, practice his skills, and eventually celebrate when he got the job. It's a beautiful example of how community can come together to support someone in very real, practical, and loving ways.
So you've led a major redesign of Plan's planning practices, integrating approaches like person-centered planning and asset-based community development. Can you tell us what those approaches mean and why they matter?
Sure. Person-centered planning is about focusing on the individual, their hopes, their dreams, their unique strengths, and then building a plan around that. It's about truly listening to what matters most to them and ensuring that their voice is central to every decision. On the other hand, asset-based community development is about identifying what's strong and not what's wrong in the community. It's a strength-based approach that values the gifts, talents, and resources that are already present. When you combine these two approaches, you create a very powerful foundation for true community inclusion.
Many families are anxious about the future, especially legal and financial planning for their loved ones with disabilities. How does Plan guide families through these complicated and sometimes overwhelming areas?
Sure, that's such an important question, Greg. At Plan, we understand that planning for the future is not just practical, it's deeply emotional. Parents and family members often worry about what will happen when they're no longer here or around to provide the care and support for their loved ones. That's why our approach is holistic. We start by having conversations with families about their hopes and fears for the future. We talk about everything from housing to daily living supports to community connections and long-term financial stability. It's not just about ticking the boxes, it's about crafting a vision that's sustainable, safe, and secure. Our team also helps navigate things like wills and representation agreements, which are essential for ensuring that a loved one's wishes are respected. We also support families in setting up discretionary trusts, which allow assets to be managed without affecting government benefits. We make sure that families understand their options, refer them to trusted professionals when necessary, and guide them step by step through the planning processes. It's not just about making decisions, it's about having them feel confident and having peace of mind.
So Plan is kind of famous, I guess you can say, that they really led or spearheaded the development of the Registered Disability Savings Plan. And it's interesting, as an estate planner for many years, I was surprised that not more people are aware of this valuable resource for families. Can you tell our listeners what is an RDSP and how can it benefit a loved one with a disability?
Sure. The RDSP is one of the most powerful financial tools available for families with a loved one who has a disability. It's a government-matched savings plan that allows families to put away money for the future, and the government matches the contributions, sometimes up to 3 times the amount that the family deposits. What's remarkable about the RDSP is that it grows over time and that the withdrawals are tax-free when used for disability-related expenses. For many families, it's a lifeline to ensure that their loved one will have financial security even when they're no longer here to provide it.
What common mistakes or misconceptions do you see when families are making when it comes to future planning and how they can avoid these types of mistakes?
That's a really important question. One of the biggest misconceptions I see that families often think is that planning can wait. I can't tell you how many times I've heard families say, "We'll get to that when things settle down." But the truth is, life rarely settles down. There's always another challenge, another change, and before you know it, years have passed. Starting early is the key because it allows for more options, more flexibility, and less stress. It also means you're not trying to make critical decisions in the middle of a crisis. Another significant misconception is around government benefits, things like the RDSP, disability tax credits, and other supports that are incredibly valuable. Sometimes families miss out on these opportunities simply because they don't know they exist or they don't know how to navigate the application process. At Plan, we walk families through those steps, making sure they understand what's available and how to access it. But I'd say the most profound misconception is the idea that the work of planning happens on paper. Write the estate plan, file it in a cupboard, and feel like everything's set. And while the legal documents are absolutely important, they're just the beginning. The real security comes from intentional relationship building. We've learned it's not just about appointing a trustee or naming someone as a representative. It's making sure those individuals are part of your loved one's life, actively, consistently, and meaningfully. At Plan, we often say it's not about what happens when you're gone as parents, but who will be there. That's why we encourage families to go beyond the paperwork and build a network of people who truly know their loved one. Identifying the people who can take on the important roles like trustee, advisor to the trustee, or representative, and actually involving them in the conversations about planning. We've seen families successfully transition responsibilities when those relationships are nurtured over time. It's not just a legal role, it's a real human connection. And part of that work at Plan is to guide families in having those open conversations, not just once, but regularly. It's about making sure that the network understands how things are set up, what roles they might play, and then ensuring safety and security for years to come.
So I should mention to our listeners, we have a disability guide also that people can access, and it's www.disability-planning.ca, and we keep that up to date with a lot of the government credits, benefits, forms, and things like that. And so that's something to check out. We'll put that in the show notes, and Rebecca will also put the plan website and things in the show notes as well. So you've talked about financial and legal issues and the importance of community, and isolation is a huge risk for people with disabilities as they age. What do you find are the biggest barriers to community building or inclusion?
Absolutely. Isolation is one of the biggest risks. And it's not just about physical isolation, it's also about social isolation, feeling disconnected, unseen, or unvalued. One of the biggest barriers I've seen is the assumption that people with disabilities belong in segregated spaces, group homes, day programs, specialized services. And while these services are important,